Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition in the series of OneLedger Talks. I'm George Connolly, President and CEO of OneLedger Technology, and today I have with me the CEO and founder of Sentrix Technologies, Akbar Ahmed.
Hey, everyone.
As has been the pattern with these sessions that we've been having, one of the things that we talk about is interruptibility. And the market is plagued with a multitude of blockchains that operate in their own siloed ecosystems, whether they're private or public. Blockchains from the 1.0 era have no means of communicating with each other to attain the well-needed synergies that the internet is able to achieve. And this is something that we discuss a lot on these programs. So this issue, better known as a lack of interruptibility of blockchains, forces consumers and enterprises to choose between one blockchain versus the other. And they ought to sacrifice the benefits of an Ethereum-based blockchain smart contract against a lesser flexible, better known blockchain and cryptocurrency of Bitcoin in particular. And those are the two, as you know, 800-pound gorillas in the room of the blockchains. So at OneLedger, we understood at a very early age that blockchain is only going to improve the way that things operate, but it's going to disrupt the entire way that next generation work to process transactions, the way that they use money in particular, the way that they live. Blockchain that we know as today needed to transcend ecosystems, permissions, and cryptocurrencies. So OneLedger wanted to offer a platform where consumers and enterprises were able to pick only the best that each blockchain has to offer. So we created this ecosystem. OneLedger is an ambitious, one-of-a-kind project in itself. The architecture relies on two core principles: sidechains and business modelization. They have a user-friendly API system. Businesses and individuals create specific modules for their needs that would easily access the OneLedger protocol, allowing their off-chain to first interact with the blockchain, with the OneLedger blockchain, and then second, to connect and interact with any other blockchains available on the platform. So we become a bridge that allows applications, particularly in the enterprise space, to work seamlessly. In this way, businesses could preserve the internal access control and specifications that they have without suffering from any separation anxiety from their existing technologies. It is in this vein that we have spoken to companies who do real-world business and have them run those real-world applications on our blockchain. And it's for that reason that Akbar and Sentrix are here today for us to discuss that OneLedger will act as a bona fide transactional storage platform through its compiling engine and its chain code runtime that will free each blockchain interacting platform from the shackles of built-in protocols and let it operate as is intended, with scalability, growing exponentially, and doing and verifying all the transactions that it needs to. So that's my opening salvo. I'd like to introduce Akbar and for him to tell you just a little bit of an intro on Sentrix.
Cool, great. Thanks, George. Yeah, so brief introduction to Sentrix and kind of what we do. We're really a software technology company out of Silicon Valley, building products at the intersection of artificial intelligence and the blockchain. I'll give you three main legs to our stool that we're very focused on. The first one is on the cybersecurity side, and we view that as foundational and elemental to all of our products because security is really kind of core. And in that space, we specifically have one of the most advanced cybersecurity scanners for the blockchain, where we do scanning and security of the smart contracts, which is ultimately the code that is used to implement blockchain-based solutions. The second leg of the stool is our governmental and industrial. And that's really around things like environmental applications. So things around like marketplaces for carbon credits. And then the third main leg of that stool is around our engagement platform. And that is used both for customer engagement on the enterprise side, as well as citizen engagement in the government side. And that, of course, plays into things like carbon credits, where you're doing carbon credits for industrial. It can be used to engage the employees to actually participate, especially with larger organizations where you need teams of people to participate, as well as on the citizen side that is used for things like trying to get citizens to engage, whether it's reducing carbon production, with automobiles, or around things like getting to like a zero waste environment, when you look at things like garbage collection, recycling. So that's kind of the company in a nutshell. Really products at the intersection of those two, and as they apply to both enterprise, industrial, as well as the I'm stuck there. The enterprise, the industrial, as well as the governmental applications.
Fantastic. So there are three key areas, and they're sort of connected and they're sort of not connected. So it's really interesting. So you've got cybersecurity, and AI-based cybersecurity is a very hot topic right now, of course, because of the complexity, the sophistication, and I have to say, for lack of a better word, the temerity or the zeal for which bad actors in the security space try to carry out their task. So we're going to come back to that one in particular. So the AI-based cybersecurity, government and industrial applications. And I've actually seen one of your applications where it's an ecosystem-based platform that does the management of a circular economy and then is able to distribute carbon credits proportionately. So that's a really interesting prospect as well. And then the engagement platform. Obviously, as humans, we engage, and the best way to be able to work between security and an ecosystem structure is the engagement that happens between either the entity and the individuals, or so the B2C or the B2B platform. So tell me if I got that right, and then let's launch from there.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty apt summary.
All right, fantastic. Now, one of the things that we said to the audience about this program consistently is that the OneLedger's blockchain strategy holds significant importance for real-world applications. We are not interested in having blockchain just be some academic pursuit. We're interested in being able to revolutionize various industries and enhance operational efficiency by infusing all of the unique characteristics of blockchain, and we know what they are, into real-world applications. And this is what we're talking about with Sentrix today. The integration of AI technology within this strategy amplifies its impact by enabling advanced data analysis and decision-making. So imagine you have the immutability and the auditability that comes with blockchain, and then you're able to integrate AI, amplifying the impact that it will have on any issue. So here's a breakdown of some of those key points from where I sit. And you can jump in after I just run through this. So we plan to bring the benefits of decentralization and immutable ledgers to real-world use cases. And this is going to be done by providing a secure, transparent platform that we facilitate, and hopefully it will transform industries. So the technology will enable, one, transparency and traceability. Blockchain uses transparent, traceable transactions, as you know, and we were able to enhance accountability. And like I said, the immutability that comes with it, the auditability that comes with it, and the ability not to game the system. So the efficiency of the transactions, by its very nature, blockchain is able to streamline transactions by eliminating intermediaries. And we know that is where problems can occur in terms of risk. Any IT guy will tell you that is the more nodes you have, the more risk you have. But this reduces costs and speeds up the process. The security, we've spoken about that many times, the immutability. Smart contracts itself is a key part of the whole application. And Akbar spoke about being able to audit smart contracts to make sure they do exactly as they're told. And again, so that there are no intermediaries as well. So the importance of AI technology, data analysis, predictive analysis, automation, enhanced security, personalization, and Akbar spoke to all these things. So I want to just delve a bit deeper now into some of these aspects, the AI construct in particular, and let's see how we can sort of get the audience to get their minds around how this works in a real world environment. So Akbar, last off, I listed a whole bunch of data about AI applications. So let's see. The last thing I said was we want to be able to come back and be able to work through basically how you think about that and how we can sort of educate the clients that we have on this whole thing.
Yeah. So, okay, so I think when we start looking at like real world applications, like where does this technology sort of interplay, right, beyond the buzzwords? Take, for example, a government or a city, a municipality that's trying to get to zero waste, right? So you have several challenges in that. One of the first ones is ultimately you're trying to capture, are people, sorting their garbage correctly? Are we putting recyclables into trash? Are we putting trash into recyclables? Basically, you're trying to make sure the quality of the data is the first step, right? So where's the first piece of that? You have some type of sensor, let's say in your garbage collection, first step, which is often the truck itself. As that's dumped out from each home, you can scan it typically with a camera, so you have some type of visual effect. And that's the first level where artificial intelligence can actually be helpful, right? So it can identify objects. You can use that to do things like counting, and making sure that people are, in fact, participating correctly, right? So that's just the first part of it. Then from there, that can go on to a ledger. And that's where the ledger gets very helpful because then you have public visibility, right? In the sense, there's trust in the system, right? It's not hidden somewhere. And then, I can basically look at my own records. I can make sure that, in fact, I'm compliant in the way that I want to be, right? So that's the first step of it. Then from there, when you start to look at zoom out a little bit, and if you start looking at, say, like a county where you need multiple cities to each participate, and you want to make sure there's transparency and visibility into the underlying data. In this case, again, are they achieving their zero waste? You want to make sure that each participant in that larger system is not cheating and is participating fairly. Every transaction that's then recorded on the ledger is visible to everyone else. You have a record of it. And then from there, everything you're doing, you have a lot of trust. And so any analysis you're doing on top of that information to make sure that, are you achieving zero waste? Which citizens are participating well? Do you need to create, awareness campaigns, to educate people on what goes into recyclables, what doesn't? Good examples, pizza boxes, et cetera. And so that's the first step of the system, right? And so you have that ability to use, in this case, the ability to identify objects with AI. You can record those on the chain. The reason that matters is everyone in the system actually understands that the data is, in fact, good and correct. And so that's one such example. Another really good one is when you start to look at things like carbon credit markets. And there you have people that are actually creating the credits. So for example, if somebody has, a farm or some other industrial setup that is actually removing carbon from the environment. So you have the organization that is essentially creating a carbon credit. You can have a third-party certifying body on them to make sure that that's in fact correct. And then that gets recorded on chain. And so now you have a verified carbon reduction event that is then recorded on chain, which then creates a carbon credit, right? And then everything from there. And so then if for example, a polluting organization that wants to buy those credits, they can now buy the credits. They can see that there is a verified event of actual carbon being removed from the economy, right? Or from the environment. And then the other big benefit of it, of course, is with any blockchain, you really benefit from this, removing this problem of double spend, right? So you know, whether it's even inadvertent, right? You could accidentally double spend or double sell a carbon credit. With the blockchain, you remove that ability. And then so you end up with this system where all the participants have complete visibility into what's going on. So it builds trust. And that's when we talk about trust. The trust is that when I see that record in the ledger, that I know it's accurate. I know that carbon has been removed. I know I can buy that credit. When I buy it, I know that I'm the only one buying it. And when I've used that credit, everyone can see that that credit has been used. And so from a multiple participant perspective, we all essentially, because of the way the blockchain works in this sense, we all have visibility into it. We can all verify it. And if my organization wants to run analytics on it, we can use that to verify that all the participants are correct. You can do the same thing. And so it essentially creates, for lack of a better word, a public shared database, or in this case, a ledger, that we can all have basically trust in and then work from there.
See, that's one of the fantastic things about blockchain. The fact that you can have a public but private blockchain where people can see the information and everyone sees it simultaneously, and it can't be doctored or augmented in any way whatsoever. So I think that's one of the amazing things about blockchain. How do you, the ecosystem that you just described is pretty exciting. Now, that can also work, and you can probably take that construct that you just articulated, and then you can just move that to almost any area, like let's say logistics. So I am shipping item A from a harbor in Shanghai. When the item, according to my specifications, is loaded onto the container, someone could send a video or scan a QR code or scan a barcode to verify that the items are actually packed onto the container. I can verify that container is closed and sealed. Then driven to a port where it boards a ship, verified when it enters the ship, verified when it's offloaded from the ship, verified when it's loaded onto the back of a truck, then verified when the truck goes to the back door or the consolidation point or whatever it is. So you can probably take that construct and use it in several different scenarios: fruit, veg, wheat, grain, anything, to track, to ensure, to verify, and audit and share information. Correct?
Yeah. Now I'll use another example here, right? So take an issue where you have multiple participants in a supply chain, right? And so both in the same supply chain as well as even competitors at the end of the supply chain. And let's use an example of rare earth materials. So you could have multiple manufacturing companies that do not want child labor in their supply chain. The distributors do not want child labor. The processing facilities do not want child labor in their supply chain. So what you can have in that situation, and where having a centralized ledger is very valuable, is that the quality and the ability to store that information is valuable to each organization, but nobody wants to trust the other organization to host it, right? Because then at that point, what if there's a falling out? What if the businesses are no longer aligned? But everybody needs that to be a core part of their business. So with the blockchain, the advantage is each of the organizations can run their nodes within a chain. So even if it's a private chain or a public chain, this is less important, but the supply chain itself can run, in this case, like a private chain, certify at the beginning that you have, for example, rare earth materials. They enter the supply chain. They've been verified as being free of something you don't want, in this case, like child labor. And as it moves through the supply chain, whether it ends up in a processing facility, and goes to competitor A or competitor B, everybody has that shared access to the information. So everybody benefits from having the information. You can do so at a lower cost because competitor A, competitor B don't need to run two parallel systems for ultimately something that could go to one or to the other. So long story short, there's a lot of value sometimes when you need a public shared record between organizations. You want to have trust in that record. And when people talk about the decentralized nature, it's sometimes less about the decentralized nature and more about that ability that each organization can run their nodes, that each have control over, access and control over the information, but that control cannot be taken away by somebody else. So whether it's competitors or parts of a supply chain, everybody benefits from having access. Everybody can have trust in the records, and at the same time, nobody has to. There's no like third-party risk where suddenly another participant decides to no longer be cooperative.
Understood. I mean, and as you were speaking just now, we're thinking about the range of features that sort of make it attractive for any dApps and any dApp developers or other developers of dApps to build on the OneLedger platform. The transaction speed, the low cost, the compatibility with EVM that makes it easier. And those features then open up all the possibilities to port their applications to OneLedger. And the enterprise use case, the real world use case that you just spoke to is so powerful, where everyone has almost real-time control over seeing the transaction, and no one can change that because it's actually embedded into the smart contracts that drive the whole thing.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, and it's very helpful for systems where you need a lot of people to, or a lot of organizations to collaborate, right? And that's the best way I would put it. It's again, I look at it like the decentralization is a technical aspect to it, but fundamentally from a business perspective, or when you look at like economies or how multiple people interact, it's that ability to sort of coordinate and collaborate around a shared pool of information. Where there's you don't want any one participant to control it. I think that is the real benefit of decentralization in a lot of these cases, is you can collaborate and coordinate and do so in a way where both participants or all participants have trust in the underlying data. And then from there, whatever people want to do for their use case is up to them.
Brilliant. So let's just pivot a bit and go back to the AI security market. I'd like you to tell me what challenges you think exist today in the AI security space.
It's a great question. I mean, let me pick on one. So there's a lot of issues, I think, with AI security, right? You have things like prompt injection, you have biases that come in, you have impersonation. Clearly AI can be used to launch more sophisticated or faster cyber attacks, right? But if we pull on one of those threads, let's talk about things like data poisoning for a minute, right? So one of the big challenges that can come into an AI system is whether or not the underlying data itself is accurate and correct. Let me turn that off. Whether or not the underlying data is accurate or correct. And a good example here is with the blockchain, what you can get data that is then verifiable. And a really good, I'll use a use case here. I'll pick a far out example here. Let's take voting in the future, right? So, clearly in the United States right now, we have this thing that's going on where, half the country thinks the voting is not exactly accurate. Where these types of systems could be applied is you can do things like, issue a token that's one vote. Everybody with your one wallet, you get that one token. When you go to vote, it's burned, right? Your vote is publicly recorded. So it's not necessarily tracked back to the individual yet, but it can be. And then you could take that wallet and, for example, if you then have it signed several times, like maybe signed by the DMV, right, for verification of identity, can be signed by a bank, and maybe signed by your utility company. So now you have the ability to know that that wallet is linked to a real individual. It's linked to a single individual, and that one citizen was given one vote token. They used the one vote token. And so all of that can become public record. So you can actually build these really interesting systems in a very pragmatic way to create a lot more trust in the system itself. And when I talked about earlier about that publicly verifiable information, it would be a pretty cool future if any citizen could sit there and just query, the voting records for a given election and say, okay, yep, this is the number of people that were given vote tokens. This is the percent of people that actually voted. And here's how the votes actually, shook out, right? It creates a lot of openness, transparency, and trust in the system at that point.
That would solve so many problems with all the fracas that we see happening in the US right now. Let's not even start about that. And you being in California, where most people think that it's a swing state now, we'll see.
Yep.
We'll see what happens instead of being all blue. So very interesting. So what kind of decentralized applications do you think the world needs today? I mean, you just spoke to the voting, but decentralized and AI-based. What else do you think the world needs today?
Yeah, so I touched on the ones from the government, and I'll just to kind of reiterate on those. I think carbon capture is probably one of the big ones. Your marketplaces, it's a very, very natural fit. When you really think about it, in many ways, it's a financial transaction, and the blockchain does distributed financial transactions very well. It does them efficiently, and it does them in a way where you remove the overhead of having a third party involved, right? So you can have, like I mentioned, it really, when you look at things like carbon credits, you have a much higher quality verifiable carbon credit entering the marketplace. You have a verified transaction record that everyone can see that a carbon credit's been sold and listed, sold, and purchased, who did it, dates, times, etc. And from that perspective is a natural fit for things like carbon credit. Other environmental applications where there's a natural fit, I think you'll see it come in. On the consumer side, carbon capture around automobiles, very, very natural fit. And then even things around like zero waste environments. Garbage is a really good one, especially when you can apply sensors at a very targeted level. So you can really have privacy for me as a human being, where at the same time you can put a sensor to watch the garbage, right? So you can get to a zero waste by monitoring whether or not people are using their waste correctly, recycling correctly, without actually monitoring the individual. So you get a really great environment of privacy for the human being, but enough visibility in this case into like waste. So those are the governmental applications. I think from the enterprise space, you have a number of interesting ones. We discussed supply chain, quality of materials and supply chain, very important. Like honey's a phenomenal example of this. Honey, I think consumption of honey every year outpaces production. So clearly something else is in the supply chain that people are buying that's not actually honey. Removing things like child labor, slave labor from the supply chains, phenomenal use case there, where you can certify at source and then track materials all the way through. And then, of course, you even have things, we discussed, as a company, we build out like our engagement platform. So in the enterprise space, you end up with these really interesting use cases. And I'll use one, let's say, for example, if you run a telco company, right, which is not a small telco, but if you run a regional or national telecommunications company, you have some pretty massive assets at play. And so clearly your communications infrastructure, your 5G infrastructure is very important. But you also have this massive asset, which is in your customer base. And a lot of those organizations that have essentially nation scale customer bases, it provides an opportunity to start to create engagement platforms that are rewarding to people based on the outcomes they want. And I'll use a good example, just a quick example here. If I'm buying running shoes very often, I'm not necessarily buying shoes. What I'm buying is maybe I'm trying to get fit. Maybe I'm trying to improve my cardio. And you can start to actually then engage customers around how they're actually then using the product. And that way, from a commercial perspective, you're starting to engage people in product usage rather than just product purchase, right? So traditional loyalty has a phenomenal place of incentivizing and rewarding and providing points directly at point of purchase. engagement platforms have that ability to now start to get into the holistic product experience, which is you bought the shoe, you got some points, and that has value. But now you're actually starting to incentivize people around, have you joined a running community? Are you sharing your runs? Are you starting to get the value out of the product that you initially purchased it for? And I think that's really the next generation that's coming on. And you're seeing forward-leaning companies do this. And a good example is Starbucks, right? You have Starbucks Rewards, which is traditional points. That's the loyalty piece. And then you have Starbucks Odyssey, which is their engagement. Totally different products. Where that gets confusing is very often people use the words interchangeably. But I think moving forward, you're going to see more nuance where people understand there's a difference between loyalty as incentivizing or rewarding for purchase and engagement, which is then rewarding for usage.
That is so interesting, where you don't just sell the product or the application, but you sell basically an ecosystem where you actually use it, get rewarded, etc. I love that. I'm actually thinking how I can get my gym to get everyone who actually, so you've got a subscription for the gym. How often do you go to the gym? How long do you stay? Are you getting the best results? Perhaps we can give you some help if you're not getting the kind of results that you need, because that would be interesting. That's something to think about. And there's so many other applications that we can use in that space. Like for instance, people who don't sort their trash, and then you have to hire more on the sorting end to do it. Or people who just throw away organics or metals or glass, et cetera, things that can really be used in any recycling effort. And if you're going to save this planet, I mean, this is one of the things that we need to start taking a lot more seriously than we currently do.
Exactly. Yeah, and there's a lot of good use cases for it, right? So I mentioned telcos as a good example, and I'll use a very simple example here. Every telco loves telling you how good their network is, right? But when you have a large network of people, if you incentivize them to actually show that the network works. So a trivial example could be, let's take Los Angeles as an example. LA is one of those interesting areas where you could do the mountains and the snow, you could do the desert, and you could do the beach all in the same day because they're close enough. If you have a network and you want to show other people how good your network is, you can incentivize your customers to do, say, for example, like, snow, desert, beach, all in the same day. Take photos in each, incentivize them to share it on social media. The reason what you're ultimately promoting there is showing that your network works everywhere, right? Is a much higher quality way than simply coming on television, for example, and saying, yeah, our network is good, we have coverage everywhere. You're incentivizing your actual, your customers to show both existing customers as well as potential new customers that these are all the places that this network works, right? It's very much an experiential aspect of showing that the network works. Another flip side of that is interesting is we've all been in spots where you get dead zones for your cell phone, right? It's very frustrating. What you can flip that around is if you're a telco, in this case, I'm really focused on this industry for a minute, is you can incentivize customers to then report back when they find dead spots, because sometimes that's very hard to figure out the exact coverage. And by incentivizing now customers participating in you building out your network and improving your network quality. So I, as a customer, am no longer in a spot where I found a dead zone, I'm frustrated and angry, but instead I am actually now incentivized to then record where I'm at. I can get my location, share that back to the company. And now the company has a much more realistic map of exactly where is the signal strong, exactly where is it weak. And that can be used to do things like, plan where, future towers are going to go, et cetera. Right. And as a customer, I can then get rewarded for it. Yeah.
I love it. Actually, I'm going to speak to my telco friends after we're done. So one of the things that keeps resonating with me is essentially how Sentrix and OneLedger will work together. The investors that we have in our platform, that's the only thing they're really interested in. So this is cool, but how do you make it work? How do you attract new participants with it? How do you monetize it so that the whole ecosystem grows, et cetera, et cetera? Let's talk a bit from your perspective on the outcomes of any partnership between us. Goals, anything in that space.
Yeah, great. So, I mean, I think ultimately the goals from a business perspective is really looking at, the end applications that make the world a better place. And I'll, at a very real sense here is let's take, carbon capture, and let's take the, getting to like a zero waste environment, because those are both very important. They're critical to the environment. And there's tends to be government initiatives around both those, right? So what we would see is really the collaboration. Let's start with things like carbon capture. So starting with the organizations that are actually pulling pollutants out of the environment, creating the carbon credits. The first thing we would see there is obviously creating the record on the onto the OneLedger chain. From there, then from our perspective is really then building out the marketplace. So building out that carbon credit marketplace so that producers can purchase those credits from from the producers of carbon can purchase the credits from the producers of the carbon credit, which are the companies that actually remove pollutants from the atmosphere. And then from there also the engagement platform, which would be things like then incentivizing when you get to automobile credits, incentivizing, rewarding citizens for participating, providing incentives for those who do a better job. Similarly, from a trash perspective. So where we really see the advantage of working with OneLedger here is, building on top of the OneLedger chain, using that to provide that visibility, that trust in the underlying system, where from our perspective is we can very much focus on the application tier.
I couldn't have said it better myself. I mean, so a couple things that I want to say for those who may not be very familiar with OneLedger. So we boast one of the fastest transaction speeds in the market. So the blockchain is designed for high output, high throughput, and low latency. The consensus mechanism that we have in the architecture prioritize fast transactions, confirmation times. And we boast more than 4,000 transactions per second. There are very few chains that operate with us. So this works very well for applications that involve finance, supply chain, IoT, gaming, obviously anything in that space. Super low transaction costs. We are $43 per billion transactions. That means that we don't make a lot of money on our transactions like other people do. But what we do is that we try to make it as attractive as possible for anyone who's going through the network in order to operate. So this is 0.7043 cents for a transaction. I want you to find me another operator who offers a cost like that. The other thing is that we are EVM compatible. I think we all know that Ethereum virtual machine is perhaps the most robust and the most pervasive platform that there is. So just plug and play straight with the EVM platform. The scalability and the flexibility of the platform, I think we can scale up as big as you like in very short time. And because of all the partners that we have who work with us in this, getting storage and scaling up is very easy. It's very secure infrastructure. And working with Sentrix will make that even more secure because we will have a dual system of auditing smart contracts before we go live with it. So in summary, what I wanted to say is that OneLedger's blockchain technology offers a conducive environment for DApp builders. It's a combination of fast transaction speed, low transaction costs, EVM compatibility, interoperability, scalability, and security. So it creates opportunities for developers to create innovative and user-friendly applications and launch them very quickly. Builders can benefit from reduced development efforts and then migrating from Ethereum. So just run the EVM the same way, and they can tap into a blockchain that balances efficiency, cost effectiveness, developer-friendly features, and security. So Akbar, any closing comments?
Yeah, so I think looking forward, really, the way we look at it is, where are markets heading? And then very specifically, where's the sort of real value? As we, with the boom that happened it was really crypto that kind of got very speculative. I think when you start to look at that now, where the blockchain, the technology lies, right, which is ultimately it's a distributed ledger technology, right? It's a DLT. And the important thing, I think, is to look at where does that really apply. And I think, George, you mentioned that at the beginning of this conversation, which is where are the pragmatic applications where the technology actually adds value. And I think anywhere that you need to remove transaction costs, specifically around where there's a third party that adds overhead but doesn't add value to the transaction, is an area where the blockchain can help. The other big pieces are when you need public visibility, right? And by public, I don't necessarily mean outside an organization. Maybe public means public within a closed supply chain, but each of the participants need it. Public could even mean with citizens and the government, but it provides that ability for everybody to see and view what's going on. And I think anytime that you need that visibility is very valuable. And then the third one is really where you want a high quality transaction log, right? In this case, a ledger. And think about the quality of like banking transactions, right? You want to make sure that each and every one of those are accurate, that nobody's modifying them in the past. And anytime you have something of value in a series of events, right? So we mentioned, money's obviously very clear one, voting could be one, polluting as well as, cleaning up the environment is another. Those are all events that you really want that quality of the information to be there. And then I think as you apply things like artificial intelligence on top of that, it really, one of the biggest keys is around that quality of data that you're building your automations on. Right. And that's ultimately a lot of AI is going to be that. Think of it like another way to think about it is just as in your automation. When you automate, you want to make sure you have quality input. And so the blockchain for things where you need that verifiability, you need that visibility, you need that trust in the underlying data. It allows you to build your automation on a data platform or a data foundation that is trustworthy. And I think those are kind of like the most pragmatic ways to look at sort of how these technologies are going to be implemented going forward.
I couldn't have said that better myself, Akbar. So Akbar Ahmed, CEO and founder of Sentrix Technology, I want to thank you for taking the time to be with us today and helping to educate both me and our community about Sentrix Technologies.
Yeah, thanks, George. Really enjoyed the conversation today.